Welcome everyone to GTAC's In This Together series. And this is Sangeeta Bhatnagar welcoming you. And today we are really fortunate to have some industry leaders that most of you know, and they have really put together some great information to share with everyone. So a few housekeeping items before we get into the webinar. Again, I'm Sangeeta Bhatnagar, and on your GoToWebinar, you will have access. Okay, so okay, I'm not controlling the deck, so we're just trying to coordinate. You can see it's all out of love. So my speakers today are amazing. Most of you know them. Afshan Kinder from Switchgear. She has been serving the community for so many years, 30 plus years of experience in telco, utilities, financial services, technology, consumer packaged goods across all the channels, contact centers, retail, field sales. And, you know, she's got her and her team, the cutting edge training and coaching programs across a variety of mediums, virtual and hybrid modalities, and really big on what I always have admired is on sustainable behavioral change and improved results, not just the common results that simple stats, but true behavior modification. So thrilled to have her. She's worked with so many top tiered companies and authored in several books. So a big giver in society, in our community. She's also part from day one of the GTAC Advisory Council, the GTAC influencers. So thrilled to have Afshan on today. And then also, wow, Mike Aoki from Reflective Keynotes. I don't know anyone who doesn't know him. He has been on the top 50 influencers on ICMI's top thought leader list, I think at least 6 years in a row. He's been our MC at the GTAC conference at 5, 6, 7 years. I don't remember, but he's always serving. He's also on our GTAC Advisory Council, a very sought out sales retention trainer. And he has helped several companies and really specializes in delivering with care. And what you see on stage at our big conference or what you hear today is really what he is like. And so they both add so much value. And so before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. Before I go to okay, here we are, housekeeping. So the whole intention, okay, back to housekeeping. Okay, so you will see on your the right hand side that you could chat, you can ask questions. So we are taking questions throughout. I'll be looking at them regularly as well as the chat. So feel free to ask anything or offer suggestions or comments, and we will do our best to involve you in the webinar. This is fully interactive and we want you to participate. And Afshan and Mike will do their best to answer your questions. And whatever doesn't get addressed during the webinar, we'll save them and I'll send them over to Mike and Afshan, and they'll take the time to help you out afterwards. Okay, and the whole intention behind this is during this time of challenge, when suddenly a huge onslaught of workers, of agents, of team leaders, workforce are all working remotely, how do we coach? How do we develop? How do we train? How do we lead? And we, as GTAC community, are just here to support one another and just to, you know, kind of help you guys who are pouring into everybody else and serving everyone. We want to pour that goodness into you and support you. So without any further ado, I hand it over to you, Mike and Afshan, and they will help you out for the next 57 minutes, and it's all yours. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sangeeta. Really appreciate that. And hi, I'm Mike, and I'm here with Afshan as well. And one of the key challenges, just to kick off today's session, is about the whole idea of what happens, as you mentioned, with the whole impact of the coronavirus and COVID-19, and what it did in terms of contact centers here in the Greater Toronto area and actually just all across North America. And, one of the biggest things is, of course, just that sense of, from a contact center perspective, the sense of overwhelm. And of course, a lot of call volumes have picked up dramatically, contact volumes picked up dramatically, and also trying to shift on entire workforce to have them work from home as well, with all the technical challenges. And also today we'll talk about some of the more specific coaching and leadership and training challenges that are out there, about being able to help manage and lead remote teams and help them become more effective as well, and about how much has changed and about what that impact is of that change and how to get ahead of that change and try to really be able to help move forward in this kind of an environment. And I know for the next part as well, I want to do just a quick little survey, a quick little poll. So I'm just going to show this right now. And the survey itself is there in front of you now. So if you want to vote on this, you can. And the question really is all about the idea about what percentage of your workforce, of your contact center, was working from home before COVID-19, before coronavirus. So think back now to before mid-March. Okay, so last year, early this year, before mid-March, what percentage of your teams were actually working from home? And there's a multiple choice question down there. Just click on whatever answer, okay, is the one that applies to your contact center. I'll give you a few seconds to fill that out. All right, so almost everyone's voted now. I'll give you just a few more seconds. For those that haven't voted yet, you can click on this, and then we'll share the responses with you in just a moment. Okay. So roughly 2/3 of you have voted. I'll just give another 10 seconds or so you can click on whatever the appropriate response is. Okay, so if you haven't voted yet, click one of those answers. I'll give you maybe 3 or 4 more seconds, and we'll share the results then. Okay, so we'll share the results. We'll take a look at those. There we go. So 88% or 86% of you said that your contact centers had less than 25% of your agents working from home prior to mid-March, prior to the outbreak of the stay-at-home orders. And then roughly 10% were between 25 and 50% of people working from home. And that, of course, leaves just 4% that were working either half of the contact center or more working from home. So very interesting results as well. I know, Ashley, you've got some ideas to share about that when it comes to virtual leadership. So I'll turn this over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Afshan. I'm obviously not Mike by reasons of deduction. So one of the key things we also want to talk about is virtual leadership. It's a new skill, and there's lots of components to it that we've never had before. And then I'm just 2 seconds. Can't see it. And the next, and I know you're looking for answers, and so what we're hoping to do today is that we have so much content. Mike and I had to actually kind of cut a lot of it out, and we only have a very short period of time. So we're going to do our best, to be able to give you some tips. But our hope is that after this session that you can go out and implement 1 or 2 things that are going to make a difference to your organization, and hopefully, start the conversation as to how are you going to structure, how are you going to work in this new normal. And so we hope to give you some ideas there.
And in terms of what you asked us, okay, things that were actually asked for us, there's some questions that you emailed in as we announced this webinar. So now, Ashley, you want to kind of cover off this part as well.
Great. If we can just continue, Mike.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So,
right.
Lead and motivate, training and coaching, what are some best practices? And, we're not going to get into this, but I think it's a really important point, which is the next point, which is, what about you? How do you maintain your resiliency through all of this? What are you going to do for yourself? The short answer is make sure you get sleep, you eat properly, you exercise. Those are like the basic foundational things. And stay positive. There's so much negative news around us. There's some good things that are happening as well. And we'll talk about those in a little while. But stay positive, be grateful. And I think gratitude is an important thing. And those are things that we can do to build resilience.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good, excellent. And we'll talk about the lead, engage, and motivate, and training and coaching during this webinar session going forward.
Okay. So what we want to do is, they often say a problem well stated is half solved. And so, we don't want to give you a bunch of tips and tricks. And I think it's really important to align on what the current state is like. What to do and how to do it. And as I mentioned before, have a deliberate purpose after this. And we're going to give you a couple of ideas for lead, train, coach, and engage in the virtual world.
Okay, good. So we're going to do a second survey as well, just really relate around the idea about what percentage of time do you actually spend on change and on change leadership as well. All right, so the second survey in front of you right now, so think about what you're going through right now this month, what percentage of time do you spend actually doing change leadership, working on that focus? And again, there's some percentages there you can check off. Roughly half of you have voted so far, so we have a few more seconds for the rest of you to vote. And roughly 3/4 of you have voted now, so we'll give like another 5 seconds just for the rest of you, and then we'll share the results of this one as well. Okay, so we'll share the results right now of this. We can take a look at it. So there's the results in terms of overall for what your peers are doing to yourself as well. And so if you look at this, the most popular answer was the second one, which was 26 to 50% of your time is being spent on change and on change leadership. So a very important part of this. And as well, in terms of looking at this, it's actually 11% were spending 75% or more of their time in terms of looking at dealing with change as well. So very interesting information there in terms of looking at change going forward. And so one of the keys here is really about what do we do with change? We'll take a look at this on this in terms of the paradigm shift itself. I know, Ashton, you had some information in terms of looking at the very first box, which is about social distancing.
We call it social distancing, but it's actually physical distancing, and I think we're really focusing on not distancing ourselves from an emotional perspective. And I think what it's done for us is that all of the distractions we had in the past have kind of gone away, and I really see in the future it's going to be a social renaissance where we're a bit more present, deliberate about the interactions that we have, and purposeful in what we do. An example is, I talk to my daughter every day. Before, I used to talk to her once a week, and now we talk daily, just to see how things are going. And it's actually dedicated time that we spend with each other and without any distractions. So, a quick story. My husband Jason, when this started, he actually said to me, it's like, the universe is kind of telling us that maybe we were too distracted, and we weren't treating the environment very well, and it just told us to go to our room, and so, we had a bit of a timeout. And so, I think, we should be looking at it, with an opportunity that it is actually a social renaissance of us connecting more with each other. So we have three big shifts that, we're going to talk about. And this is kind of stating what the problem, statement is. The first one is just really around, what are we seeing? How does it affect leadership? And then, the last one is all the very specific things around communication and culture. Well, the first one is before you had vetted your employees, they stayed they work from home, and now you've got a whole range of different, types of individuals working at home with different performance levels. And that's a very different type of leadership than when you're dealing with your top performers. An increase in online customers. I think it was everybody's dream to have a higher level of self-service. And if you've ever read John Cotter about change, he talks about a burning platform, and COVID-19 has been the burning platform where everyone's jumping in, to technology, and they're having new relationships with technology. A friend of mine, who isn't that technically proficient, goes, I never heard of Zoom before today, and so, there's going to be a change in your organizations as more customers go online, become technically savvy in terms of the amount of tech calls you might get. You may already been experiencing that, and the type of skills that you might need, because of that, and the ramifications of having a higher self-service numbers, which is a good thing. The other big change is the culture. So, when we're physical, we're colliding with each other. We We would have hallway conversations. We would, have these impromptu dialogues. Now we have to be deliberate in our conversations. And, I really think that, the small acts of kindness, the gestures, if we see one of our colleagues in the office, we would go run and get a coffee. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. So we have to make those types of things happen for us if we're wanting to build a culture that's cohesive, and a growth mindset. So I think we have to kind of really think about what kind of culture do we want, and we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. And that's so important as well with the culture, that you talked about, Afshan, is the whole idea about being disciplined and being very deliberate as a leader as well to really focus your time and attention in terms of what kind of a culture do you want to create and how do you want to gain the return on investment for your time as well. And one thing about being on-site, which it sounds like the bulk of people were in terms of previously before, the last few months or month and a half, is that you could have those quick drive-by conversations. You could see somebody in the hallway. You could walk around the contact center and talk to people directly. Now that's not there. Now, if you want to have that quick conversation, you've got to be deliberate about it now. To deliberately use Slack to go and instant message somebody or get somebody on the line for a phone call or use Zoom or GoToMeeting for a video conference. It's now going to be a deliberate intention. And that means you have to be very deliberate in terms of how much of your time do you want to spend actually doing your communicating and relationship building. So it does change things quite a bit now in terms of having to really put more of an intentionality, more of a discipline in yourself to have to actually make that time and to reach out to people and conversely actually have them open up to you as well, which we'll talk about a few more slides into this too going forward. The other key is the emotional intelligence. So Afshan, as you mentioned, the whole key here is, again, that idea about that kindness and that interactivity, seeing somebody, around the lunchroom, seeing them around the floor. Now you're doing this via Zoom, via camera, like the way that, the Afshan and I are actually having this conversation with each other and also with you, from your home offices and your offices as well, is just to go and build that warmth and to have that emotional intelligence. And we'll give some more skills in a moment in terms of how to do that, how to use those technologies to help build that relationship. But that's the key now. It's being more deliberate about building relationships by these kinds of distance tools. The next thing we'll take a look at as well is in terms of what's changing. So if you look at the future now, so looking down the line a few months, a year from now, in terms of what's changing, a lot of it is changing. And as mentioned, the idea about a social renaissance. So going from social distancing, which is really supposed to be physical distancing, but still having relationships, to now being more of a social renaissance. So how can you really build that culture now? It was one thing to have 500 people in your office building. Now having 500 people working from home, each one in their living room or whatever, the kitchen table, how do we build those 500 individuals now and make that into a team? And one of the keys is communication. So using all the communication tools. We'll talk about how to use those tools, email, text, Zoom, GoToMeeting, etc. How do you do that? Also, we'll talk a bit more about engagement as well, onboarding, training, and coaching. The key is this. It's not just as a leader, your own actions, but the actions of all of your supporting systems as well. So for workforce management, how are they communicating? Okay, training, coaching, recruitment as well. How are they recruiting people? So all those things really take place to make a holistic total plan for your contact center in terms of how you want to engage people. And also being able to go and have control of productivity. And a key question here, of course, is now that folks are working from home, how are you really able to go and tell what they're doing, how effective they are, how you can help support them to make them more effective and be better at their jobs and be happier at that as well. So the whole idea about control of productivity, how do you do it? Do your KPIs change? What mechanisms do you use in terms of being able to call coach and call monitor and look at, schedule adherence, etc. Those things change as well. So a number of big changes coming up in terms of the whole flow of this. And right now, again, we're only about a month and a half into this kind of a change. So the next thing is looking in terms of the consequence of not building virtual leadership skills. And one of the keys here, of course, one of the risks is about team member disengagement. Bear in mind, you've got people working from home now. And so one of the things you want to watch out for is to help them be a part of the culture. If you don't do that, though, if you're not deliberate, build things in to really help build that relationship with them and the overall organization, they're going to feel like mercenaries. Guns for hire, basically. They're in their living room, they're doing their, 80 calls a day or 200 emails a day, and they're just focused on that only as piecework, as opposed to being part of an overall team. So you don't want 500 individuals, you want a team of 500 altogether with this. And also reciprocity as well. One of the keys here is this, and the phrase up there is you don't give so they don't give. The idea is this: every time you contact them, email, text, phone calls, video conferences, etc., you're having communication and you're building a relationship. And you want to give with them as well. So giving out in terms of asking them how they're doing, and not just a shallow how they're doing question, but specifically how are things going with those kinds of calls, or how's your home office setup going? Can I help you with that at all? Okay, any frustrations as far as the VPN or the internet connection, whatever that is, but trying to find out more about how they're feeling as well, and that's really crucial. So again, being able to help focus on that is important. And actually, you want to talk about some of the things that feed as well to an increase in.
Absolutely.
So I'll turn it over to you at this point.
Thank you. Trust was very important before, but I really think it's the new currency in virtual leadership. If you kind of think about our organizations, one of the reasons that, we have such a strong, one of the reasons that, reps come to work is they have relationships with other reps, like that social interaction, we make friends. Of all the centers that I've run, people got married, they had relationships. There's lots of folks that I have known in my own organizations that are, still, in relationships today. And so when you don't have that, and you have that sense of isolation, it's all the things that we experience today, but on steroids, higher attrition. If we don't give, they don't give, so customer issues and escalations, errors. We're now going to have to deal with performance management remotely, and definitely in terms of, you can't see what they're doing. There's a lack of control, so it can have a very negative brand impact, to that. So it's really important that, as I said, Mike and I have been working on this. Virtual leadership is a new skill, and we really have to take time to develop it and work on it. It's not going to come organically.
Okay, good. And Sangeeta, are there any questions from the audience in terms of what they want to learn more about with virtual leadership?
Okay, so I did get one question here. Further to what you're saying, take time to actually speak on the phone versus the chat is huge. They hear the voice and all the inflection that goes with it. So if someone added in a comment, and then I had this other question here. Now that we know these shifts are here to stay and there are serious consequences to not changing, how do you drive change?
Okay, good. Well, great question, Sangeeta. So we'll talk a bit more about that in terms of what has to happen with this, all right? And I know, Ashley, you want to talk a bit about the leadership operating system.
Sure. I like to use models because it helps me actually kind of get it clear in my mind what I'm doing, when I'm doing it, and when there's an issue, it actually helps me with identifying the root cause. So, this structure was needed before we went virtual, but it's a structure that I like using. And, a leadership operating system is like your car. So it's all the things that you need, whether it's your processes, the schedule of meetings, all the things that you need to actually structure your day, to structure, what goes on in the office. So you might even call them, management activities. And so what we actually do need, and that's why we asked you the question about change leadership, is that to make a car go, we need to have skilled leaders and fuel, and that the fuel is their skill and their energy. And so those are the things that we need to have together in order to, go forward. And so, I use this model, and then what I tend to do is that I then help myself to prioritize it. So if we go to the next slide, Mike, if you remember back in school, Maslow, and it's the concept that we use, and it really basically says that if you don't have, some of the basic needs met, you actually can't have the psychological needs met, and you can't be fulfilled. And so we don't translate it completely over, but we use that same concept. So Mike and I created this concept around virtual leadership, like how do you prioritize? How do you get that inclusivity? Well, inclusivity is an end, it's an outcome, and it starts with making sure that we satisfy basic needs first. Then we go up to relating, and that's on a one-on-one basis. Do we know how to relate to people virtually on a one-on-one basis? And then we go to belonging. Do we know how to virtually connect one to many? So, building teams, not just at the individual level. And then we go up to the very top, which is how do we build between teams? How do we build community between sites? And that's kind of the hierarchy in order to gain inclusivity. And that really is how we prioritize. So when you kind of benchmark your organization against where you are, have you actually satisfied all the basic needs, first? Because people, they can't talk to you technically because their internet is always dropping, or they have some issues, you will never be able to relate to them on a one-on-one basis. So that's kind of how this works. So what we're going to do is all the tips and tricks, and we've got a ton of them, is that we're going to take, starting with basic needs, and then we're going to relating, and then to belonging. We're not going to touch community for now, but I think where you really need some, I guess, some guidance from us is in these 3 levels, and we'll start with the first one. But maybe we can just pause for a moment to see if anyone had any other questions.
So there was one more question that came in while you were speaking, and it's from Annie. And the question is, what are some tools that you can share that will help managers track productivity for your employees when they are work from home?
I think, it's the same tools we had before. So we may not be observing what they're doing, but we have the same tools, and so that's quantitative. So we're going to have to get better at analysis and data insight, and so that's a skill that needs to be developed. So what are we looking at trends? How do we handle outliers? So we used to do that when we were physically together. Doing it virtually is going to be even more important. And then there's the qualitative side. Being able to ask good questions, so you're checking in. You're not kind of sitting at the surface like, how are you doing? And not asking, other questions such as, what's going on for you? And all of these things in terms of productivity cannot be built unless you build trust. No one's going to give it up and tell you what's going on for them if they don't trust you. So, that's why, that social renaissance of making sure that we're building trust and building relationships is so important, because all of these other factors travel with it. So I don't think there's going to be new things, but what's interesting, and I'll just digress for a moment, is I was talking to somebody just yesterday, and and I'll talk about it a little bit when we talk about culture, but some organizations are putting webcams back into offices to see what people are doing. One of my friends told me that her husband was asked to come into the office and sign a waiver to say that he wouldn't drink or smoke weed at home, while he was on the job. Like, it's crazy. And so I think we have to trust our team. And that's another point we're going to bring up in terms of where are you in trust? Like, what are your actions that you're going to show that you actually trust your team? I hope I've answered the question. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, good. I think you did, Afshan, definitely. And part about again looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the whole idea about helping to build that trust. But the first step is really satisfying those basic needs first. So the basic tools and the basic beginning level of trust, which is from an agent's viewpoint, is can I even count on the equipment I've been given, the laptop, the internet connection, VoIP or the phone, etc. So the basic needs really refer back to equipment, the system, etc. And really being able to help establish work from home agents. But part of it also is building trust and building the basics, and just to kind of build upon that question about work from home is also to set the basic expectations. So looking at what are the basic expectations for people as far as, again, scheduling and schedule adherence. I mean, now they're not commuting to work and back, is there more flexibility there? The frequency of communication as well. And so part of this, again, the whole idea about deliberateness, which is as a leader, you want to have the deliberateness to build into a schedule. And we'll talk a bit about an engagement plan in a moment, but to build into an actually schedule when you're having your one-on-ones. All right, with your frontline agents, when you're having team meetings, when are town halls taking place. And it has to be very deliberate now. It has to be really focused in terms of this, because there's a really easy temptation for people to slide into when they're working from home of feeling isolated. They don't see you anymore. And so for them, again, from the living room or the kitchen or wherever they are at home, they feel like a mercenary in some ways. And so it's having to go and build in that deliberateness. And a rule of thumb we'll give you with this is, if you feel like you're over communicating, you're probably doing just enough. Okay, because for people at the other end of that lifeline that are at home alone, they really do feel isolated. So you want to communicate effectively all the way through and use all your tools as well. So your knowledge base to put up updates, memos, alerts, etc., Slack or whatever instant messaging system that you use, voicemails if you want to use those as well. Okay, live phone calls, video conferencing, etc. Every tool that you have, you want to reach out to people. And some people respond more to some tools than others. Some want it in writing, some want to hear the warmth in your voice, some want to see the smile on your face as you do a video conference. So you want to really look in terms of all those tools that are out there and try to build that connection basically back to the company itself and back to you as a leader yourself as well. Also looking at virtual training and coaching. We'll talk a little bit more about what those tools look like in a moment. The key is this, though, which is look in terms of your rules of engagement. One of the things that takes place, and getting back to Ashley, your comment about trust, is the fact that when someone's remote and using, say, video conferencing, they don't actually see all the same body language that they do face-to-face. And it was interesting, I was reading an article that was written by an FBI interrogator. So imagine that, somebody in the FBI doing interrogations of people, criminals. And what they said is the fact that in video conferencing, they just don't get the same level of visual information. They can only see whatever the other person's camera wants them to go and see. And they won't see other things like body language or potentially hand gestures that are outside of the frame of the video camera, et cetera. And so they're getting less information that way, which also leads to, though, less trust. And so part of this is you want to have to really build in these rules of engagement that people feel free to go and, again, ask questions, including challenging questions, or indicate if they feel uncomfortable about something. So an example would be, having a ground rule with your team to go and say, if we're having a team meeting, a video conference or conference call, if you have a question, obviously feel free to answer it. But if I said anything that offends you in some way, or maybe make you think, whoa, what's going on there, feel free to go and say, can you please explain, why? And the words please explain are almost like a code word to go and say, okay, I need to get more information, or I feel a bit uncomfortable. Can you tell me more about what's behind what you just said? So those kinds of ground rules are really important to have, because you want to build that trust. And that's the basis of that trust, is first of all, having that framework of how you want to engage. And the last thing, of course, is to go and listen as well. It's not just about, as a leader, telling your front line the information. I mean, that's important as far as process, procedure, expectations, but also listening to them. So as Ashley mentioned, asking those really deeper questions and then listening and paraphrasing back. So if someone feels anxious about, what's going on with, their job, or they feel beaten up by the calls that they're taking right now, it's important to help acknowledge that, paraphrase, acknowledge that, and then be able to help address that issue. So I can tell that you're frustrated by having everybody yelling at you as the customers, and we are working on this because of, or people are going through that as well. Here's some techniques that will help you, between calls, by being able to help cope better with that, by taking deep breaths and being able to go and on your breaks, step away from your computer, etc. But first is listening. So you actually find out what they need help with. And that's really crucial as well. So again, just some of the basic tools to help you build those relationships going forward.
Can I jump in with one more question that came?
Of course, Sangeeta.
Okay, great. It's from Dean Turchiaro. And the question is, what specific leadership skills should we build into training programs for virtual leaders?
Okay, great question. What I'd say about that, I know actually you can try, or sorry, Sangeeta, Ashley, you've got some ideas about this as well. But one of the things I'll really mention about this is I'm a big believer in training people to go and use the tools themselves, because how to use, say, Zoom or GoToMeeting or WebEx, whatever it is, actually learning how to use those tools effectively, how to look at the camera, how to be able to go and use your voice, how to be able to go and read someone else's body language over the camera, how to be able to go and use some of the other tools that are there, like polls and surveys, highlighting things, etc. But just even how to use the technology is a really big key. Another key I'll mention about this is, again, just that deliberateness and building engagement. So being able to ask the right questions to help, the other person open up and feel comfortable with that. I know, Ashley, you got some other ideas as well when it comes to helping to, build virtual leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that whole emotional intelligence side. You've got some leaders who like reports, they, like to do projects. And I think, the role of the leader is going to have to change in terms of the time that we spend with our people has to go up. And so we have to have good time management skills. We have to be able to have a start and stop time, in the time that we spend with people with a specific, outcome. So I think we have to be a little bit more structured in the terms of having some guidelines, but yet being organic in the conversations that we have. And I mentioned it before, but data insights. So you have to be able to look for patterns, whether you're speaking to people or whether you're looking at numbers. So, we've all talked at various webinars about mental wellness, and it's really important, especially at this time, that we pick up cues and know when to put our hand up and say, maybe EAP is good for you now, because, we have a big responsibility when we were face-to-face, with helping our team members. It's actually even grown because we have to be more observant and really listen for cues and observe cues, and then look at the numbers and look at the trends and be able to not knee-jerk to something, but really look at, what are the patterns that we're seeing? And so that whole concept of outliers that we've, always done in the past, when everyone was in the office, is going to be even more important in the future. So I think I think you really have to decide as a leadership team and have a dialogue to say, what kind of culture are you going to have? Is it going to be a growth mindset, or is it going to be a compliance culture, or somewhere in between? And, you can write stuff down, but really your actions are going to speak louder than words. And we kind of had this trustometer, so on the right side is you micromanage, just, as, I was talking about that one company who have webcams in people's homes so they can see what they're doing, to having self-directed people, empowered individuals who you do trust. I've got a quote at the end of this with Ernest Hemingway, who said, the best way to trust people is to trust them. It's like customer service. Do you build policies for 5% of your customers who, are going to, rip you off, or, come for refunds or abuse your service? Or are you going to build your things for 95% of your folks, who do come into work to do a good job? So I think, you're going to have to decide as a leadership team very deliberately, in terms of, the actions and where you spend your time and what your leaders, will do, your first line leaders and your second line leaders. And then the next one is just really about authenticity, for the communication. Like, you don't have to be perfect, just communicate what you know when you know it. You'll see the slide coming up later, but we really recommend at the senior level that you reassure people on a daily basis, and you let them know, the position of the company and what's going on, and you can create some efficiency by using a message checklist, what, when, where, why, and how. And if you kind of satisfied all of those, then you've got a robust, message out that is clear for people, and they know what to expect because they're expecting these elements to be in your message.
Okay, good. And that's a really important point as well, Shan, because people oftentimes assume that you know more as a leader than you actually do. And so they wonder why they're not getting information about certain things. So it's important to go and find out about what do they want to find out more about? What are their doubts? What are their fears? What are they anxious about right now? Just so you can address some of those issues, because sometimes they'll be concerned about things that you might not think of would be an issue for them, but it is. And so it's really important to have that two-way communication as well, and really build in those dedicated opportunities to communicate. So you hear us use the word deliberateness all the way through this, because part of it is when someone's remote, when you have a remote work team like this, is to be very deliberate, very careful in your planning to build those things into your schedule and be able to help reach out to people in that sense. And in terms of looking at, the kind of frequencies that are there, if you're looking for a general guideline, what Ashley and I both came up with was looking in terms of senior leaders that you do want to have your daily communications. So, and things are changing so fast right now that it literally is daily, sometimes more than once a day, in terms of what's changing, policies, procedures, outlook, etc., what's changing in there. And also being able to go and check in as well with the people that are your direct reports and find about, 15 minutes a day to find out what's going on with them. So what challenges do they have? What issues are there? What trends are they seeing? So you're able to help really build relationships with them as well. And certainly that first line leader level, so looking at team leads, managers, etc. It's really all about being able to, again, have those 15-minute check-ins, but also you want to vary it according to need. So really focus in terms of, for the people that are around you, do some of them need more help than others, or more reassurance than others, or have more information to give than others? And feel free to be flexible with that. You want to give everybody at least some time, but if you need to spend 45 minutes with one person and 15 with another, if that's appropriate for both of them, go ahead and do that. Because the key about this, again, is it's about relationships. Okay, so being able to help build those remote relationships with people. And so again, invest that time in them to help them be able to, build those relationships and grow and perform really well. The other key about this is you also want to have as well your pre-shift, huddles. So basically have those team huddles to, again, share the information. You can do it virtually through GoToMeeting, Zoom, whatever, but have those available, because it's not just enough to go and put a memo out in the knowledge base. You want to get feedback from people, because things are changing so fast right now. So you want to actually get that real-time two-way feedback back, from your team members. And as well as you look at this as well, remember coaching. And I know one of the things that takes place in terms of this extra call volume is, of course, coaching and training tend to go by the wayside. And, one of the comments we heard was about the fact that everything is on fire right now. My hair is on fire. There is no time to coach. And again, we can have a big discussion about whether or not you should be coaching right now or not, but certainly think about the fact that you do want to be able to support people. And whether it's, today, whether it's next week, hopefully within a couple of weeks, but as you start getting back into coaching again, we'll talk about how to do that to reintroduce coaching. It's important to do that, to have the coaching, to build a relationship, to give people feedback as well, positively, and also things to grow on as well. And that's crucial. The other thing to think about is this: the shrinkage factor, okay, now that people are working from home and with the current stay-at-home orders, is a lot better, okay, in the sense that hopefully if someone's taking a break and going from their living room to their kitchen and then back to the living room, they won't be late. Let's hope. I know it happens sometimes still. Sometimes they get lost even going from their living room to their kitchen. But generally speaking, your shrinkage should be a lot less. There's no commute. There's no going outside to a restaurant for lunch, etc. So your schedule adherence should be getting better, okay, as part of the work from home process. And that gives opportunities now to be able to help, with that reduced shrinkage, to be able to go and give a little bit more in terms of having coaching interactions and taking some time to go and do that as well. So just some things to think about when it comes to some basic needs and tools and rules that'll help you be able to help build those relationships and build that coaching back into your schedule as well going forward.
And if I could just add one more comment to your comment, Mike, is the split shifts. This is a great opportunity to matching lifestyle needs to the business needs. Because you can, work a few hours in the morning and then perhaps a few hours, in the day. I know a lot of families are, moms and dads are helping their kids get online because they're, taking training and their education online, and, they need that time to, help them with the technology, whether it's 15 minutes. Like, it's a little bit of a different world. So I think, the flexibility, you'll get it back, from your employees. When you're flexible, they tend to be more flexible. We got to ask about communication, which is, we tend to communicate a lot through email. And I think, I think we should just kind of put a X through it, from an email perspective. The message should match the medium, and you guys have to decide as a group within your leadership team how you're going to communicate. So, if you need an answer, a decision, or input, pick up the phone or video conference. Don't email. We see those long email strings, and we have an opportunity just to stop that. And you do email for one-way communication, where you're not expecting any feedback. And those are just some ideas as to, how the message should match the medium. Let your team know how they can get a hold of you, and, and it might be, like, I know within my team, I always either text message or email saying, hey, do you have 5 minutes for me now? If we don't have a regularly scheduled meeting, and it's just respectful, just to, ask and for someone to, let you know when they're available. And then just the patience, really, just around the fact that, we're together today and this webinar, we're going to have a little glitch here and there. But from a body language perspective, you can't see my hands going, but they are going underneath, my picture here. But, there's always going to be a slight audio delay, visual delay. Give people a moment to speak, and so you might say something like, like, don't feel like you need to fill the air all the time. Give them a moment to speak and just say, hey, I know you have something to say. I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say, and silence is okay. So I think, those are some things that, we need to kind of think about as we communicate back and forth. And we feel like those specific things are tools and rules that, will really help you.
Okay, good. Excellent. And, part of this too, as well, is watching your time. So being that little time management ninja, we got Kung Fu Panda up there in the corner. Part of this is being really good at time management, because as you've noticed all the way through this, there's that deliberateness thing again, that idea about being very deliberate in your communication. So part of it is being able to help portion your time appropriately. And I know that a lot of you are working really long hours right now and have been for the last couple of months, just trying to go and get all the basic tools, computers, VPNs, etc., all set up for your agents and for your frontline managers. So part of this is now, as we sort of look at the next phase of this now, in terms of hopefully the technology piece is beginning to settle right now, and you're beginning to reintroduce some of the coaching pieces and training pieces, is being able to go and look at your time management, okay, and being more deliberate about that, building things into your schedule so that you're able to actually focus on those things and put them in as priorities. The idea about putting the big rocks in first. And so part of this is setting up an engagement plan. So not just writing down your Outlook calendar, have a coaching session with John Smith at 10 a.m. tomorrow for 30 minutes. But what are you going to do to help engage that person? Okay, what do you want to ask John to find out how they're feeling, how things are working in terms of working from home? How can you support them more? What are they going through right now? Okay, what is the purpose of that? So not just booking your calendar, but what's your engagement plan? What are your questions? What are your ideas? How do you want to build that relationship, okay, with this individual? And what are they going through, and how you can really help build that bond between yourself and them, and between the company and them? And how can you do that more deliberately? So really thinking through and planning, just like you would with any other kind of interaction, coaching session, really planning in terms of what do you want to help do to build that engagement going forward. And be flexible, because it may also change based upon what they need. You might ask one question and they say something about whatever they're concerned with, and the conversation goes down that path. And that's fine as well. As long as your intention is to help, to build a relationship, and to increase engagement, it's worthwhile in doing that. And the point is to be flexible in terms of what you're saying and doing in that conversation, help support the other person, but be deliberate in making the time to have that conversation. And that's really crucial as well. And also leave some white space for the unexpected. So again, block out some times when you might have to, attend to fires or emergencies. And also have some white space in your calendar as well, so that people can request time from you. So for your direct reports, let them know in terms of how they can contact you. So as Ashley had mentioned, can they text you and say, can I call you in a minute? Okay, do you have time to go and talk right now, etc. Establish some ground rules there in terms of how people can reach you when they need help, and how flexible that can be as well. And also look in terms of trying to make these conversations more in terms of more frequent, so high frequency, but also, not as long as well. So if you look in terms of, say, when everyone was back in the office back in, January, you might be able to go and have, say, a 2-hour training session. Okay. When you look at remote training, and I know, Ashley, you and I do a lot of training, it's tough to do a 2-hour webinar. It really is. Okay. So it's shortening those things down. It might end up being a 1-hour webinar with 2 sessions done a week apart, or even 4 half-hour webinars, half an hour per week over 4 weeks. It could be a coaching session as opposed to a 1-hour coaching session. It could be 4 15-minute ones, okay, at different times during the week. So really looking in terms of the frequency being much more important than being in terms of the length of time itself. The other thing about this is, again, looking at the how part of this, is really think about, what's your purpose in doing this? So for each one of the people that you're communicating with, as you have your one-on-ones with them, and then for your team overall, what's your purpose here? Is it to pass information along, outline new procedures, build relationships, build morale, share success stories, all of which can apply, by the way. What's your intention? Okay, to have that purpose that's in there. And then how can you structure your meeting or conversation, help bring that intentionality to life going forward? And also looking at this as well, ask in advance in terms of what people need. Okay, so before you have a meeting with somebody, or even a conversation with somebody, ask them in terms of, what do you need? Or I can do a bit of research to find answers for my team. Ask your team then, what do they need answers for? And survey ahead of time so you can help prepare that. And that's something that Ashley and I did with this webinar, was to actually ask people that we thought were coming, or that we invited to go and come, what do you want to learn? How can we tailor this to really meet your needs? And the more successful you do that, the more value that you're imparting in each one of those interactions. And therefore, the more people will trust you and come to you for information, and come to you to build that relationship as well. And again, through all this focus on building trust. So the emotional intelligence, the sincerity, the way that you come across, you want to build trust with people, because you need that trust so they'll actually open up to you and let you know more about what they need going forward. And that's really important as well. And Ashley, you wanted to talk a little bit about technology too, going forward.
With technology, make sure that, you test it in advance before you meet with your team. Have a plan B in the event that somebody can't get online or whatever, that you have an audio conference. Give them some tip sheets on how to use, the features that are, say, in whatever platform that you have, whether, it's WebEx or GoToMeeting or Zoom or whatever it is. And do set the expectations that have the camera on. So, in your meeting request, tell them it's going to be video. So at least, they comb their hair and they look presentable, or they're not caught off guard. And those are really important. Mike?
Okay, good. That's important as well. Also, use the tools that are available to you. So depending upon your platform, we're using GoToMeeting right now, but for other platforms too, there's very similar features, one of which is the raise hands feature. So if you're dealing with a larger group of people, typically anything more than a dozen people on a video conference, you're probably best to go and mute everybody at once, just like we've done here, because otherwise you have a lot of background noise. You have like people's pets in the background. I mean, Ashley, you had your cat in the background before we started, things like that as well. So again, being able to help mute some of those noises, and then have people raise their hands, clicking on a little button that's there to raise their hand, and then be able to answer those questions or mute them. Or just let them know that they can unmute themselves as well if they want to ask a question or make a comment of some kind. Also, building interactivity like the polls or surveys that we've run here, just again to help break that up. And the rule of thumb here typically is that every 5 minutes during a phone call, interaction, meeting, every 5 minutes, You want to be able to help shift the interactivity in some way. So whether it's having, like here, having Sangeeta yourself asking questions from the audience, doing polls, you know, etc., showing videos, we could do that as well. You want to help build that interactivity and that sense of energy into the conversation itself. So for training, speaking, or training meetings, etc., it's really important. Also, if you're dealing with a smaller group of people, you can use what's called gallery view, where it actually shows everybody's webcams across the screen. So you might have a grid of, say, 4 webcams across and 4 webcams down, so you can see all 16 people on your team. And that's really important when it comes to the smaller team meetings. So again, 12 people, 15, 16 people on your team or your direct reports, because you want to be able to see their facial reactions and their feedback as well. Sometimes people won't click the raise hands button or unmute themselves. You can see on their face they have a bit of a puzzled look on their face, or they want to make a point. Okay, they're about to speak in some way. You want to see that. So you want to use gallery view as well. And this gets back into the whole idea about training people how to use the tools like GoToMeeting or Zoom more effectively, so they really get the maximum out of that as well. Also, a lot of these allow a virtual whiteboard. So when it comes to brainstorming, taking down ideas, etc., you can actually use a virtual whiteboard in many of these video conferencing platforms, so you can actually type in or write in what some of the key bullet points are. So ask your team for ideas and actually type or write in their answers. Or even better, deputize somebody else to go and be the presenter, and they can actually type in the answers while you facilitate that discussion. So again, it's a lot of things that you would do in a face-to-face conversation, you can actually do now in a remote meeting like this. It's just being able to use those tools more effectively. And again, the whole point of it using a whiteboard, polls, surveys, interactivity, etc., is to really generate that sense of energy and a sense of trust, so people feel they can open up and talk and actually share those ideas as well. That's really important. One last thing I'll mention when it comes to looking at the technology itself is you want to practice with this a lot. So even before you start with a meeting, actually practice using these skills. So practice with this, set up a quick little dummy session. You can use maybe a second computer or, somebody else at home or whatever. Like my wife, for instance, will be at home with her computer. We can do like a quick little mini rehearsal session just to practice using these tools and become good at it more effectively. And something else to mention too, for those of you that are trainers out there, the tip is, as a trainer, you want to have a second person there to act basically as your tech support, and also to go and look at the video, the chat sections and the Q&A sections, like Sangeeta, you're doing for us right now, to be able to help field those questions. And that's really important, especially as you first launch, say, a new hire program or a multi-part training session. You usually get all your bugs worked out in the very first one, if not before. So it's good to have a second person there as well to help give support for that. Absolutely. Now, we'll ask if they have any questions. Yep.
To do that.
Mm-hmm. Good. And Sangeeta, were there any questions from the participants?
So there's one question. It was around intention, and are there any additional ideas? I know it's not under the tools section, but intention came up. Additional ideas you could share about that?
Sorry,
setting
attention or intention?
Yeah, setting intention for the meetings
or
for any communication. Any other additional ideas?
Yeah, I think, when we talked about the medium and the message, that matches, whether, you have structure, I think you have to determine how often you're going to communicate and why you're doing it. We're kind of 10 minutes away, like 8 minutes away before closing. We probably won't get through all of our content, but one of the things to help with structure is to have for your first line and even second line leaders as an FAQ, so you can get that consistency across the board. You have checklists of the types of things that you need to provide, in a meeting. You have a purpose for a meeting with a, beginning, middle, and end. So those kinds of structures that you have, with respect to intention, are you updating? Are you gathering input? Are you coaching? Are you developing? All of those are part of your engagement plan to see what it is. Is it a one-on-one to check on someone's, wellness and to see, how they're doing it? Is it a performance management conversation because you're seeing, certain things that, you're not happy and you're curious to see what's going on? So I think each will have its own intention, but those are, you're going to have to figure it out in terms of, how it all fits into your calendar. Another recommendation that we would make is for senior leadership is give an idea as to how your leaders should be structuring their day. Not that you're going to give them, by 9 o'clock do this, but just generally, what percentage of their time should they spend here and here and here. Having that level of structure and direction and clarity is a really important piece. So that would be another thing that would be helpful. So Mike, I know we have 7 minutes left, so we should probably move through.
Sure, no problem at all. So we'll talk about this. Again, part of the structure that you mentioned that when you outline this for your frontline leaders is also to be observant and leave more time for small talk as well to help build that remote engagement. So, and again, not just asking how are you doing, but diving a bit deeper in how they're feeling and what you can do to support them as well. Another key is to look for nonverbal cues. So that's why video is so important versus a phone call, is because you want to get those visual clues and be able to find out in terms of just looking at someone's reaction at their face, again, are they happy or not? Are they look puzzled about something, worried about something, etc. Look for those nonverbal cues. That's very, very important to help, again, build a relationship and respond appropriately. And also ask questions in the conversation to try to get to the root cause as well of how they're feeling or challenges that they're having, so you can actually help fix those things for them or help work with them to get better at those things. And also, too, the biggest thing, again, is to build trust. I know we're talking about this a lot, deliberateness and trust, but those are two of the biggest takeaways that are here right now. Afshan?
Sure. Coaching and developing. A lot of you guys aren't coaching right now because if you're in financial services, you've just been overwhelmed with the number of calls, new processes, and things like that. You need to kickstart it. This is the time your folks need it the most. So focus on the positive, use sessions as needed. Do it using video or audio. You can use live or recorded. Make sure that you have some context through analysis of trends as to, what's working, what's not working. I know that, some of you might be listening remotely, to see how things are going and what they're saying. Make sure that you have the positive along with maybe the knowledge gap that was there, because they are doing a lot of things right, and they may be beaten up a little bit because of the volume of calls, for some organizations. And always follow up, so if you had a coaching session, there's lots of ways to follow up. Pick up the phone, you can inter-office messaging, but it's really important to make sure you have that boomerang back.
Okay, good, excellent. And I know we have a lot of, it's interesting because actually we're debating about how much you can put into the webinar itself. We had so many great ideas going forward. So there are a few more screens or slides that are here that we're just going to quickly kind of bypass for now, but we will make the PowerPoint deck available on the GTAC website. So if you go to gtac.ca, there's a tab there that says COVID-19 and actually lists all the webinars. There's a whole series of them done by different panelists or experts, and ours will be up there as well. So we'll have the YouTube recording of this conversation that you can look again to watch again or share with your team. And we'll also have the PowerPoint deck as well, so you can see some of the slides that we did have a chance to go and get to right now. So I'm just going to quickly go through these. You won't actually have to see them, but I just want to quickly go through them. We do have more content here. And again, we'll share the whole deck that's there on the GTAC website itself, so you can take a look at those. Now, at this point, what I want to do is, go ahead, Afshan.
So think about when you build your teams, before everyone used to go into the lunchroom and have lunch with each other. One of the ways that you can have is a virtual coffee break to bring the team together, or, a virtual happy hour. There's lots of things that you can do using the technology so people know that when they're on the break, there may be other people that they can actually converse with. Think about those things as you kind of, build, I guess, your new normal, as we're all working together towards like this new way of being. So again, one thing I, mentioned is, the takeaways is, you're going to have to trust your people, and you're going to have to figure out what your, actions are going to be that show that you trust. And you're going to have to take time with your time management, figure out how you're going to structure your day, what's important to you as a company. Your senior leadership should give you some structure in terms of where they think that you should spend your time. And then you have to actively work at building your skills, whether it's the leverage of technology, your data insights, your time management, your emotional skills. That's for some people, they're high empathy, and some people aren't high empathy. So I think those are really important things.
Okay, good. And definitely build on that too when it comes to training. You want to be able to help continue doing coaching, training, and developing your team as well. Just getting back to the question about how would you train, what would you do with your frontline virtual leaders? Train them on emotional intelligence, train them on DISC. Again, looking at personality types, as Afshan, or you just hinted towards, with empathy, is look in terms of DISC training as well to be able to help them with that. And also, again, just focus on the coaching, and also look in terms of actively building your culture and your relationships as well. So some key final thoughts for you. And Afshan, I know you and I can turn this now over to Sangeeta. Sangeeta, you have a few last things that you want to share with the team as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Afshan, Mike, you knocked it out of the park. Thank you so much for sharing with our community and helping everyone move through this and navigate through this crisis together. I think I know you helped many people. So we have another amazing webinar lined up for next Friday at 2 p.m. And with the onslaught of people working from home, the remote workers are prime target for hackers, and they are going in fast and furious. So we have scheduled cybersecurity tips, especially for leaders, and that's set for next Friday. And we have 2 industry leaders from the cybersecurity space coming in to speak. And so go ahead and register. The link is up on our site, and I'll also send it in the follow-up email with the recording of Afshan and Mike's webinar. There are a few spots left, but not many. So this is from 2 people that are very, very active in the cybersecurity space. So take advantage of that. And actually, if you want to just block in your calendars, every Friday at 2 p.m., except for May 8th, we'll have different subjects, different industry leaders speaking, sharing on a variety of topics that you've been asking for. So you could just block that 1 hour, have a coffee, and be part of this community. So I'll hope to see you on the webinar next Friday. And then I really want to promote this event. It's from Neil Dillon is the co-founder and produces this event through Unsung Heroes. And it's usually a live show. All the money goes to a variety of charities. This year, because of COVID, it is all going to be digital. So he'll have every week release virtual songs through whatever tool he's using. So you can get passes for attending. And there's so many ways that you could sponsor. And the reason we're promoting this is all the funds go to Camp Ooch, which is for children suffering with cancer. And, charities are greatly impacted through COVID because you cannot do fundraising. So I just really wanted to promote this. It's with a very pure intention. If your company can sponsor or support, or you want to attend and have this as a team event where you're all watching some songs together, that's fun. So there's so many ways we could support this initiative that in the long run helps the children. And so I just wanted to end off with that to make sure I could plug this very noble cause, and wonderful, wonderful shows. And with that, it's 3:01. We ended perfectly on time. Just want to thank our speakers, Afshan and Mike, and all of you for supporting this event. I hope you stay well, keep safe, and take care of yourself. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye, everyone.